Okay, this is Sports for Real with Coach Hall. Kind of feel like a lot of UConn's women's basketball opponents over the years beat up and body slam after a virus swept through me, had me on the cameras, but it couldn't knock me out. And when you get whipped in a sport or anything in life, you better get back up, get back into the game. I try not to leave the game, but sometimes you have to. I'm just fortunate enough I was able to limp through it. But if you're not aware, let me start it this way. We know that the UConn men have won the last two basketball championships. But before that, King women's college basketball has been UConn. And they have been led for the last 41 years by Geno Auriemma. And last night, Auriemma knocked off Fairleigh Dickinson for win number 12-17, which makes him now the all-time winningest coach in college basketball, men or women. He just passed Tara Vanderveer, who was a fierce rival of UConn. And it's probably poetic justice because, they snarled and griped at each other. But in the end, with the comments from Vanderveer, you can tell that there was a healthy respect there between the two competitors. But one thing about college basketball, it seems like to me it's always been easier to build a female dynasty in basketball than in men's college. I say that because if you remember when John Wooden was dominating UCLA, winning those championships over that 12, 13-year period, it was almost untouchable. And he was untouchable because his program was far ahead of everybody else. Nobody could quite tell what he was doing. So until people started to catch up to him, he was going to dominate. So when he finally stepped away as a champion, you started to have people to catch up with him. Now, he still would have dominated had he been able to continue. Excuse me. Had he been able to continue, but he wasn't able to because he retired at 65. So you can't blame him for that. That's what people did back then, even though he would have lived another 35 years. Damn, we'll start coughing when I get online. But my point is this. If you look at college basketball for women, it's the same way they had it when UCLA was dominating. You have people that don't have a matchup to the top women's program, and they tend to dominate. Tennessee was the dominant program for a while. And even before Tennessee started to run that string of wins together, each team that won the championship for females, they were dominating. Meaning, if you take USC with Cheryl Miller, nobody could beat them. Then Jody Conrad at Texas came up with a team. They were undefeated. Leon Barmore at La Tech, he ran off a couple championships. Each time these women won these championships, even though they didn't have a dynasty, they won a lot of games. And nobody could touch the best team. In other words, they didn't have much parity. And it's still kind of that way in women's college basketball now. That's the dude that sold me the meth. You talking stupid, Carl. I won't even respond to that. But here's the deal. Don Staley right now is the new king of college basketball. It's going to take her about, I'm sorry, I wasn't doing this until I got online. It's going to take about 12, 13 years for her to catch up to where Auriemma is now. But he's still coaching. Who knows how long he's going to coach? So with the rate she's going, it's going to take her a while to get there. But I think that it's still easier to dominate college basketball for women than it is men because you don't have the same parity level as you have in the men's side. But that's not to take away the accomplishment of these female coaches because it's an awesome job. And I think Staley is the next one to reach that 1,200 win plateau if she sticks with it. Staley is a Hall of Fame basketball player of her own right. And most of the time, those kind of players, they don't usually stick with that coaching thing too long. But it seems that Staley has a knack for what she's doing. and she's done a great job at South Carolina. Before that, she was doing a pretty good job at Temple. But still, once you get to that top level of female college basketball, it's hard for you to get knocked off. And so until another coach comes along that can compete with Staley, she's going to continue to dominate. Last night, for instance, not only did Auriemma break his record, South Carolina won their 43rd straight. So they're on track to be on the same level as Auriemma. But one thing I don't see nobody breaking. Auriemma had 2 win streaks where he won 98 straight and 111 straight. I don't see nobody ever getting to that. So I know Staley's had a lot of wins, but I don't see her doing that. Now moving on to college football. This weekend you got a couple big games. Colorado is under threat from Kansas. I told you guys a couple weeks ago that I didn't see Colorado having a problem with Oklahoma State. I didn't think that Utah was going to be able to stand up all the way. But I said then that Kansas was their biggest threat. How you doing, Linda? Kansas was their biggest threat because this was a team that was supposed to be pretty good starting out the season. But they didn't start out that way because they were turning the ball over. For whatever the reason, they have stopped turning the ball over, and now they are playing the way people expected them to play. So they are a threat to the Buffaloes this weekend. Now, we'll tell exactly how good the Buffaloes are, because if they can run off Kansas, then you know that this is actually a pretty good football team, because Kansas is actually playing some pretty good ball right now. And that'll let you know exactly what we're dealing with when Colorado takes on Kansas. But I think the way that Colorado has his chip on his shoulder and the way things have unfolded this year, it looks like that Travis Hunter, he should win the Heisman if he don't. But he's probably going to win the Heisman. And things are rolling now for Colorado. So much so now that everybody has Dion as their hot child coach of the year right now. He's probably going to win the college coach of the year, which he's deserved. But playoff-wise, I think if they get to the championship, they'll somehow probably win that and they get to the playoffs. Then we're going to find out just how much they've improved from last year, because the Big 12 is a big drop-off from the old Pac-12, and they don't play the same rugged schedule as they played before. That's not to say there hasn't been a whole lot of improvement. It has. But I just don't think that they're still on that rugged level yet. Okay, let me start real quick. Texas Rodeo said, what are your thoughts on Oregon State? Well, I got a lot of respect for Oregon State and Washington State because they're trying to hold that Pac-12 thing together. And I think in the end, they're going to end up saving that conference, and they're going to end up rising again, because you know how things change in college football, and you see how rugged it is for everybody with these tough schedules. Some schools are going to get tired of that, and they're going to go to a safer place. And teams like Stanford in California, they're going to realize that it really doesn't make sense to be going cross country every week, be trying to play football, basketball, and other sports. They're going to come back home to the Pac-12, and it's going to rebuild. And I think you're going to see a big difference in the Pac-12 in the next 4 or 5 years. And you said Kansas have been playing good ball, but for how many more years? Well, it all depends on how long they can keep a coach. It's the same thing with Indiana. You know, Indiana's undefeated, and they got their big shot this weekend against Ohio State. I think it's a good timing or a good placement for this game for Indiana, because Ohio State's got Michigan next year. That's their world-class Super Bowl every year. They could care less if they go 0-11. But if they can whip Michigan, that makes their whole year. And because of that, even though Indiana is a deadly threat, they don't see them because they usually beat Indiana. So their full focus is not going to be on them. It's going to be on Michigan. Yes, Michigan is struggling, but they got a good defense, and they showed you that last week when they played against Indiana. Now, Indiana's got that offense. They got that quarterback, Curtis Rourke. He's been playing 5 or 6 years. Again, we got all these long eligibility players dominating college sports right now, and you wonder how they get so much time to be eligible. But whatever the case, they are. But Rourke, he's a threat to Ohio State. They're going to have to get to him, and they're going to have to stop that running game. Otherwise, if it gets to be a shootout, I don't know if Ohio State can keep up. because the closer the game gets as it goes on, the more confidence Indiana is going to get. And then in practice on Tuesday, Ohio State lost its starting center to an Achilles injury. So they kind of hobbled a little bit. So it's going to come down to turnovers. Can Indiana stick in this game without making a whole lot of mistakes? If they're able to do that, then I predict that Indiana is going to knock off Ohio State and go to the Big Ten championship game. But if they don't win, it still doesn't hurt them because they have Purdue next. And if they can whip Purdue, they'll still end up with a high ranking, and they'll probably end up in the playoffs without having to play that extra Big Ten championship game. Remember, I told you, the teams who are the freshest are going to be playing for the national championship because you already got a rugged schedule. It's going to get tougher in the playoffs, and attrition is the number one word that everybody needs to resolve. So it's going to come down to who is the freshest, who can stay healthy. Ohio State just lost a big player. You're going to need that guy going down the stretch, even though they may have a suitable backup. I don't know. But you always want to have the guy who won the job out there to play in the critical times. So I expect Ohio State to do well, but I'm also predicting that Indiana is going to knock them off and make it to the Big 12, Big 10 championship game, which is the first time that this weekend is actually the first time that Indiana is playing in the top 5 game. Their program has been terrible on the football field. As you know, basketball is completely different. But it's nice to see an upstart like this continue to go far. So I'm pulling for the underdog to go as far as they can. But Alabama's in a tough position. They got 2 losses and a log jam. They're trying to make it to the SEC championship game. The advantage they have is they have the tiebreaker over Georgia. And Ole Miss, I'm not sure how they shake out with Ole Miss because they didn't play them this year. But Ole Miss, they're playing Florida. That is another trap game. Just like Indiana, they're going to have their rival next week when they play Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl. So if they can get by Florida, they should be able to get by Mississippi State. And it's just a matter of sitting back and waiting to see where they get seeded in the playoffs because I think they're going to qualify. The other thing, Texas has to get by Kentucky to set up the matchup with A&M. And also you have A&M who has to get by Auburn. Auburn's starting to play a little bit better. And with Hugh Freeze as the coach, anybody can step up for Auburn at any time and start playing all of a sudden. You're a good sports analyst. What's been the most interesting sport in the last decade? Football, basketball, etc. And at what level? Well, I follow all the sports. High school, I like high school football because it's pure for the most part, but even that's turning sour. So you have teams that are putting together programs that look like college rosters in high school, so you have an unplaying field now. So I scratch high school football off. I would probably say college football, the way it's evolving. NFL is even becoming predictable, especially with the way they start to make calls for certain players to make sure those players advance. So I think that college football has been the most interesting in the last decade. So, and the way it's going with these playoffs is holding that spot right now. But I appreciate the comment. But just to recap, got to congratulate Auriemma for putting together that program he has out there in Connecticut. And he's got 12, 17, and who knows how long he's going to coach. He probably got nothing else to do. So he might stick around another 5, 6 years. And that'll put him at somewhere around 1,500 wins. And I don't know if Don Staley is going to coach that long. I don't see it. I think she'll stick around another 10, 12 years. She'll get somewhere around 12, 1,300. But as long as Auriemma keeps coaching, then it's going to put that record out of sight. Then again, she may not even be focused on anything like that. She may just have her own personal goals. And if it gets to that point, great. But you can't take anything from Auriemma. But what more impressive to me in that situation are those 2 win streaks of 98 straight wins and 111 straight wins. And that's because of parity. You don't have parity as much in the women's side of college basketball like you do the men's side. So that's something to think about. And Don Staley, I think she's the next one to reach that 1,200 club. And it's going to take her another 10, 12 years to get there if she wants to coach that long. And then in college football, I think Indiana is good enough to beat Ohio State, but they can't go in there and play like they played against Michigan. They can't fall behind. They can't get started by the crowd, and they can't turn the ball over. If they do any of those things, then they might just get blown out. And then the college football committee is going to be sitting around thinking, well, who is this team? You know, we thought you were somebody else and you didn't even show up. But I think they will show up, just like I think Kansas is going to show up against Colorado. But if Colorado is continuing to get better like they have been, I think they should have enough firepower to hold off Kansas. But if they get on a run and they separate from Kansas and Kansas start pressing, they can end up pulling away from them the same way they did from Utah. So Deion is in a good position. He's a hot coach right now. Everybody's talking about him going to another level, another school. I don't think he's going anywhere. I think he's getting out of college coaching altogether because once his sons leave, including Travis Hunter, I think that was his sole purpose for doing it. If he's just bored and just wants to stick around and have something to do, then he may stick around for a year or two just to show guys like me that, yeah, you were wrong. But so far, I hadn't been wrong about the moves that I thought he was going to make. And he says he's not going anywhere, but how many times have we heard from coaches who said that they're not going anywhere? Timmy Ickner, happy Thanksgiving to you also. Kind of looking forward to it. I need a break. These kids about to drive me crazy, but I like what I'm doing, so that's fine. But that's pretty much all I have to talk about. I apologize for all the sneezing and wheezing. Some kind of bug jumped on me a couple of days ago and I've been trying to shake it off. They're trying to whip me, but it's the fourth quarter, so I'm going to run the football no matter what. You can't hold me down. So, but anyway, I got the Steelers on tonight. Oh, just a little story about the Steelers. That's probably why I'm sick, because I had some fried Raven wings the other day. Turned out they were poison. You know, the Steelers had to show the Ravens what time it really was. And I told you guys that there is a blueprint out there to defeat the Ravens. If you want to beat Baltimore, you're going to have to stop the run between the tackles. They did that. He held Henry to 65 yards. He scored his touchdown. He also gave up a fumble after he hadn't fumbled the ball in over 500 touches. Second thing you have to do, you have to prevent Jackson from escaping around the end. Well, if you stop the run inside, you know that Jackson's going to try to bounce outside. That's illustrated how they stopped that when he tried to run outside on a 2-point conversion to tie the game. I don't know who he thought he was playing against. Maybe he thought he was playing against the Broncos or somebody, but Pittsburgh know Baltimore too well to realize that if Henry's not coming through there, and he's probably going to try to beat him sneaking around the outside, because they really don't think that he can beat them throwing. And once you stop those two things, the last thing is, can you stop Baltimore from throwing the ball down the field? Well, I've told you before, in big games or against teams that have decent defenses, he don't usually get down the field too much. He's throwing the ball to Mark Andrews and the fullback or halfback or somebody in the flats. He's not really pressing the defense. Now, when they're able to run the football and he's able to get outside, and that leaves those guys wide open because they all suck there trying to stop the run. Then he can hit those guys over the top. You don't have to throw a perfect pass if the guy's wide open by 3 or 4 yards. But in the Steeler game, he only had his main deep threat, Zay Flowers. He only had 2 catches. And he got that last catch under prevent defense, and when they were trying to tie the game. And he scored a touchdown, and that was on his second catch. But why can't you do that during the process of the game? My only thing about Jackson, he's a great player, he's a great runner, and all that. All I want to see the guy do is throw the ball when the game is on the line. I have yet to see that. Everybody gives all these players all the praise, but they never say what they can't do. I'm the guy that's telling you what this guy cannot do. And until he shows me that he can throw it down the field, I'm going to continue to tell you that he's not doing it. Okay. Abdi says, can you say hello to Busra Saheen? She is your fan. Well, hello, Busra Saheen. I'm glad you're my fan, and I hope I said your name right. So, having said all of that, keep an eye on the Ravens. They're still a good team. They're not dead. They can make their adjustments. And all it takes is one game when you put everything together and anybody can get beat, even my Steelers. But they're going to be on tonight. We're going to whip the Browns, well, which is actually a trap game because the Browns always gave the Steelers trouble. And even though they're not that great this year, they're still the Browns and they can beat Pittsburgh. So if we can get by the Browns tonight, rest up, come back after Thanksgiving, and jump on somebody else. But until then, you guys have a great day wherever you are in the world. I got to go to work. I'm out.